Chapter 15. Mickey Minns awoke to find himself staring at a strange ceiling. The experience in itself was not altogether strange. It had happened many times before, but it caught him temporarily off guard. Minns hastily shut his eyes and made a serious attempt at a mental rerun of last night's closing moments. Glimpses came to him, buying drinks for policemen, a bottle of Jim Beam that literally materialised beside him, Jack Lane clouting him with a walking stick, and that was about all, really. Mickey groaned. Perhaps there'd been some unpleasantness. Perhaps he was in the nick. He opened his left eye and took in the ceiling. Georgian blue. Mickey set free a small sigh of relief. Not the ceiling of a police cell, then. Police cell ceilings were invariably white, stark and intimidatingly so. Where, then? The hospital? No, hospital ceilings are generally green. Hospitals were always painted green in the old days, something to do with all the blood. And how when you stare at red for a long time and then look away, you see green, colour opposites or some such thing. So they painted the walls green, which was the opposite of red, and when you looked up from the blood, you didn't see green and throw up everywhere. Or was it a tradition? Or an old chartreuse? Or something? And did they still paint hospitals green anyway? Mickey seemed to think that they didn't. And so he opened both eyes. Thinking about hospitals always depressed him. He'd been pumped out too many times and had too many eager-faced young interns going on at him about his liver. Georgian blue. It was definitely Georgian blue. It once owned a guitar that colour which had belonged to Jimi Hendrix, but the thing was bewitched and used to feed back in the middle of the night when it wasn't even plugged in. Mickey had sold it on to a coven in Acton. Georgian blue. Who did he know that had a ceiling painted Georgian blue? And silk pillows. Mickey dug his fingers into them. He wasn't lying on the floor. He was lying in somebody's bed. There came to Mickey's ear the whisper of silk sheets, and to his senses the realisation that he was not alone in this bed. Mickey turned his head to the side. Shave his shape! He was blinking at a headload of golden hair, and now at the face of Anna Gotting. Good morning, Mickey, said Anna, yawning and stretching luxuriously with naked arms. I bet you'd like some coffee. Mickey rammed a knuckle into his mouth. You were wonderful, sighed Anna. Where did you learn all those moves? I've never taken tea with the parson before. Incredible. Mickey fought with his brain. Come on, you bastard, he told it. Remember, please remember. He jerked upright and began to belabour his skull with his fists. Remember or I'll smash you to pieces. Stop it! Anna leapt to restrain him. She didn't have any clothes on. Naked. Mickey doubled the assault on his head. Stop it! You didn't do anything. I was just winding you up. What? Mickey's fists hovered in the air. What? I was walking home and I found you asleep in a phone box. I dragged you back here and put you to bed. Oh, said Mickey. Oh, said Anna. All right. Mickey struck his head once more. Stop hitting yourself. I'm sorry. Minns fell back on the pillow and draped a forearm over his face. Not too far to obscure his view of Anna's nakedness, but just far enough so she couldn't see him looking. As the silken sheet covering Mickey's midsection began to rise, Anna said, Forget it, Mickey. I'll get you some coffee. She flipped out of the bed into a peach-coloured toweling robe and was gone from the room. Inspector Sherringford Horvis sat all alone in the porter-cabin, and he was actually smiling. He rubbed his palms together and considered the big fat file which lay upon the desk. The file of Hugo Artemis Solon Saturnicus Reginald Arthur Rune. I think I can state, without fear of contradiction, said Horvis with a chuckle, that I've definitely seen the last of that appalling young woman, which leaves me 2 full days all alone and undisturbed to solve the crime of the century. Now a lesser man, having suffered as Horvis had suffered, under sentence of redundancy, and faced with the prospect of trying to solve a crime which had yet to be committed, might well have given up the ghost and tossed himself off some high building. But not Inspector Horvis. soon to become Lord Horvis of Kew, nor tosser he, the future peer of the realm, tapped a smiling mugshot of Hugo Rune with the fingertip of accusation. "You, my fine fellow," he said to it, "you the face at the wheel of the speeding silver car. I know you, don't I? And I know that car. My extensive knowledge of automotive arcana tells me that this is nothing less than a now legendary McGregor Mathers water car. I spy a pretty pattern here, and no mistake. A train from nowhere, diamonds from nowhere, a green demon from God knows where, and the return of Hugo Rune. Add to this 2 burnt-out cars of rare vintage and unknown origin on Kew Green and 2 more in the surrounding area." Horvis took up the mugshot and studied the broad and grinning face. "The great unsolved," said he, "and the greatest yet to come, but not unsolved this time. Oh no, sir, not this time. You are the man I seek, sir, and you are the man I'll find. You're out there somewhere, hatching some diabolical scheme. I can feel it in my water. I will have you, Hugo Rune. You see if I don't." If the ears of Rune were burning, the master showed no sign. He placed his great hands on the table and heaved his not inconsiderable bulk from his chair. "We are going to best and beat these blighters," he declared. "Wipe them out, delete them. But as I have said most eloquently before, it is not sufficient that we do it in private. Retribution must be seen to be done. The whole world must watch us when we do it." "The whole world?" Tuppe whistled. "The whole world." Rune pushed his chair aside and began a ponderous pacing. "We must expose the villains, expose what they have done to mankind, reveal the truth, the ultimate truth, that they have manipulated us throughout the centuries. All the world must know, and all the world must watch." He ceased his pacing and made that picture this gesture that people sometimes make. In order that the world might watch, the world must be given something that it wants to watch, something really well worth watching. Tuppe nodded enthusiastically. "What?" he asked. "A crime," said Rune, "a great crime, committed live before the watching world, a crime of such magnitude and audaciousness that it will be considered the crime of the century. This crime will arouse the passions of the world. This crime is part 1 of my stratagem." "Golly," said Tuppe. "Picture this," said Rune, referring back to a gesture he had prepared earlier. "The great crime is committed. The world looks on. The authorities are baffled. The police are baffled. Everyone is baffled. And then one man steps forward. 'I can solve this crime,' he says. 'I can lead you to the door, to the many doors, in fact, where the criminals lurk.'" "The entrances to the forbidden zones," said Tuppe. "The very same. To all of them in London, every one, at the same time. Imagine it. All those armed policemen, all those special forces chappies in the body armour, all those fine young soldiers, all that weaponry." Cornelius thought he could imagine it only too well, and he did not like this imagining one little bit. "This one man who steps forward to solve the crime. That would be you, I suppose." "None other," said Rune. "And the crime itself, that would be committed by yourself and your companion, under my instruction, naturally." "Naturally. But about this crime of the century that will have the world sitting on the edge of its collective seat, what will this crime be exactly?" "The kidnapping of Her Majesty the Queen," said Hugo Rune, "on prime-time TV." Colin Collins was sitting all alone in his little glass booth at the job centre when Polly Cotton walked in. He was dreaming about trains. His full name was Colin Does Anybody Want to Fish This Bugger Out Then Collins, which was all to do with the vicar dropping him onto the font during his christening. Now, this would have been nothing more than a tired old gag if it hadn't been for the fact that the vicar did it on purpose. At the time, the cleric's extraordinary behaviour bewildered the little congregation of family and friends, but as the years dragged by and Colin dragged himself towards the estate of manhood, all those who had attended the christening considered that perhaps it might have been better if the bugger had not been fished out at all. It wasn't that Colin was evil. That would have been considered acceptable in a family that proudly numbered amongst its ancestry 3 iconoclasts, 2 serial killers, a well poisoner and a horse mutilator. It was that Colin was dull. Dull. That's what he was. Soul-destroyingly, mind-numbingly dull. His father, Colin Collins Sr., was dull, but his was an everyday, easy-going sort of dullness, and all those who knew the Collins family considered Colin Sr. the very acme of wit and personality when placed against his son. Now it is a well-known fact amongst those who know it well that the world is full of Collins. They're everywhere, though as a rule you don't notice them. There's one in every class. Study any old school photograph and you'll see him. Middle row, easy to miss, and no one can remember his name. It's Colin. And when they leave school, these Collins, they go on to work for the DHSS. Here they sit, wearing those glasses, those shirts, those ties, those cardigans, those open-toed sandals and those grey socks. And they dream about trains. Other than for Polly, the job shop, as it had been humorously renamed by a man called Colin, was a veritable Mother Hubbard's cupboard when it came to seekers after employment. This was probably because there weren't any jobs for sale. Polly surveyed the uncompromising row of little glass-fronted booths. All appeared unmanned. She strode up to the first and rapped on the glass. "Shop!" she called. Colin stopped dreaming about trains. "How can I help you?" he asked. Polly glanced in the direction of the voice. It came from the next booth. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't see you there." "Do you want a green foam?" Colin asked. "What shade of green is it?" "This shade." Colin held up the green foam. "Not really," said Polly. Colin's eyes began to glaze over. "I want a job." "You'll have to fill in a green form then." "But I already filled one in." "Well, give it to me and I'll get it stamped." "You already have it." "Do I?" Colin scratched his head. He had dandruff. "I don't think I do." "Well, somebody does. I filled it in the last time I was here."
"When was that?"
"About 4 weeks ago."
"I wasn't here then."
Colin straightened the row of biros in the top pocket of his cardigan.
"I was doing in-house training."
"Learning makes a man fit company for himself, as Young once wrote."
"I'm sorry."
"Never mind. Would you like to go and get my green form from your files?"
"Oh, all right."
Colin rose from his chair. "Wouldn't you like to know my name first? It might help."
"I know your name. It's Polly Gotting."
"How do you know that?"
"Used to be in my class at school."
"Did I?"
"Yeah, I sat next to you."
"Oh, yes. Of course." Polly tried to make it sound convincing. "It's Dermot, isn't it?"
"It's Colin,"
said Colin. "Oh, yes, Colin, that's it."
"I'll get your green form then."
"Thank you, Colin."
"Oh, it's not Colin anymore,"
said Colin, drawing Polly's attention to the smart name badge he wore.
"It's Mr. Collins now."
It was a very big filing cabinet, and G can take a bit of finding, especially if you're dreaming about trains.
"I'll have to hurry you now,"
said Mr. Collins when he finally returned.
"It's half-day closing."
"Is that my green form?"
"Yes, it all seems to be in order. What did you say your query was?"
"I don't have a query. I want a job."
"But you have a job, and a good one too, with a pension."
"I just got made redundant."
"Redundant is a red form,"
said Mr. Collins. "I just want another job. What do you have?" Mr. Collins studied Polly's green form.
"Polyhymnia Gotting, polyhymnia."
"The muse of singing and sacred dance, it's Greek."
"Is to me."
Colin had a go at a smile, but he just couldn't pull it off.
"You passed all your exams," he said. "All of them."
"That's what they were there for, to be passed."
"I didn't pass any of mine."
"Perhaps you weren't clever enough. No offence meant."
"None taken. But it can't be anything to do with being clever."
"It can't?"
"No, Because I'm clever enough to be in full-time employment and you're not.
Polly was clever enough to keep her temper. Do you have any jobs on offer?
Not for you.
Why not for me?
Because you are overqualified.
What does that do? Polly pointed to a gleaming new computer terminal that stood on Mr. Collins' desktop.
That,
said Colin proudly,
is an online computer. It gives an hour-to-hour update of all the new job opportunities. You punch in the qualifications of the applicant and the computer matches them to any available employment and prints out the reply. It's brand new. Only arrived half an hour ago.
Why not punch in my qualifications and see what happens?
I'd love to, but I can't.
Why not?
Because it's half-day closing and we just closed.
Polly would dearly have loved to drag Mr. Collins from his little glass-fronted booth and punish him severely, but instead she smiled. It looks incredibly complicated, she said.
It is. Very.
I can understand you being very wary about operating it.
Who said I was wary?
Careful then. It must be a bit of a responsibility. I know. If I were in your sandals, I wouldn't fancy trying it out without my supervisor present.
I'm fully capable of using it. I did it at in-house training.
Of course you did, but I can understand you being nervous.
I'm not nervous.
Probably doesn't work anyway.
Of course it works.
Sure it does. I bet.
Does work and I'm not nervous about using it.
I'll come back tomorrow and speak to your supervisor, said Polly. I expect she's a woman. She'll have the bottle to try out. Always best to go straight to the top. Cut out the unambitious technophobes who don't want the glory of being the first to make a placement with such high-tech equipment. Men have sight, women insight, to quote Victor Hugo. So long, Colin. Polly turned upon her heel. Mr. Collins dithered. He hadn't understood half she had said, but he got the general gist.
Just you come back here,
he said. Polly watched him as he worried at the computer keyboard. Her mother had told her, as she had told her sister Anna, that all men were basically stupid, and she, like her sister, would pass this information on to daughters of their own one day.
Eureka,
said Colin, suddenly. Eureka?
Eureka. It was an LNER passenger train. Classic 462 arrangement, 4-wheel bogie in front, 6 coupled driving wheels and a pair of trailing wheels. Eureka.
It's Greek to me.
It's a perfect match.
Mr. Collins was looking quite excited.
On the computer. The job just came up this very minute, and your qualifications match it exactly.
Coincidence? Synchronicity? The steam-driven bogie truck of destiny?
It's at Buckingham Palace, said Colin, personal assistant to His Royal Highness Prince Charles.
The steam-driven bogie truck has it,